Hi, my name is Jhillika Kumar from Mentra, and I am beating the often path by building a company to bring neuro inclusion to every Fortune 500 organization in America and eventually the world.
Jhillika Kumar is the founder and CEO of Mentra, a neurodivergent-friendly talent platform that intelligently matches neurodiverse individuals with employers that value their strengths. Traditional talent and employment platforms tend to prioritize a certain kind of candidate, which can leave many highly capable people without meaningful work. As our world changes, we have to realize that neurodivergence is not a weakness, but rather a strength for many mission-critical roles, and large companies are starting to realize this, thanks to my guest today. Mentra puts recruiters in front of candidates rather than forcing them to navigate through the challenging process of finding a job. How? Through humanistic AI and community-driven design. It's an awesome concept whose time has most certainly come as we face a new frontier of AI and machines and so many problems we've never dealt with before as a species. I can't wait for you to meet right now Jhillika Kumar. My name is Ross Palmer, and this is Beat the Often Path. Well, that's a pretty fascinating and ambitious goal. So welcome to the show, Jhillika. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we finally made it work. It's Friday. I've got the Friday feeling. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I got a shirt from Goodwill, and I feel like I'm in a Friday. You look much more professional than I do, which is excellent. How long have you been doing this?
Well, I started in college when I was 19, and how long I've been thinking about this for and building this as a side hustle, around 4 years total. But we started as a startup officially in March of 2022 as a, full-time on this mission. So
okay.
1.5 years.
Like so many people do, this is a mission that is close to your heart from your family, as I understand. So explain to me how you ended up here.
Totally. So my brother, Vikram, is a non-speaking autistic individual, and he has complex support needs. And for most of my life, we wondered if he could understand what we were saying. He didn't give a lot of eye contact. He seemed disconnected. And then it wasn't until the age of 27 when, through technology, it was actually accessible technology, and a letterboard and an iPad, that my brother was able to type his first words. And he was 27 when he did that. And one of the first things he shared was that he has eagle hearing, was actually the first thing. And I wondered for so long, why was that the first thing that he typed to us? And I realized it's because he wanted to communicate that he was communicating that he could essentially hear what, we were all saying. He could understand it. He was absorbing it. And he, even when we thought he wasn't listening, he's fully cognitively competent and understands. And so that was sort of a huge revelatory experience for me, for my family, because, we realize it's not at all what meets the eye. In fact, there's someone here with so much potential who's brilliant. He started writing poetry. He learned over 5 different languages from watching TV. And we were like, he's brilliant, and noticed that oftentimes there's, so many, in fact, 1 in every 7 humans who are neurodivergent who are overlooked in today's world, and significantly misunderstood. I myself am a neurodivergent. I learned in the last year and have been underemployed and have felt that feeling of my potential not being tapped into. So trying to make a change in the world and in the workforce of the future.
I could imagine that after 27 years of not being able to communicate, you could hear something like, "There has been a pebble in my shoe for 27 years." What? Who knows what's bottled up inside for so long? But it's interesting that the first words are, I'm listening. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah. Absolutely. That pebble in the shoe is a perfect analogy, because it's like, not even being able to express if you're hungry or if you're in pain or if you want to tell the person you love them. And so the pebble in the shoe is like, yes, the little problem that over time.
This thing has been annoying me for so long. Just these things that we take for granted in terms of expression. And Mentra.me, the project, which is related to mentor. You mentioned that yourself, you feel underemployed, which we'll get to in a minute. I'm very curious to dig into that. But the core idea is that there is a large percentage of the population, 1 out of 7 people, who struggle, I think, to find work in traditional paths that don't cater to their needs, or more importantly, perhaps don't fully understand how to make use of people who are neurodivergent. Have I summed that up accurately?
Yeah. It's, yeah, 1 in every 7 humans who are neurodivergent. It's at 80% under an unemployed part of the workforce. Oftentimes, the way that today's hiring systems and even technologies are built are to look at the very traditional linear measures of success, like someone who has gone to college or has had, an internship or work experience. And oftentimes, for a population that has been so overlooked, that might not exist, that past work experience or education. However, there's a lot of potential and talent that does exist. And so figuring out how do we, measure that non-traditional talent and really apply that to a job in a way that someone's, feeling fully fulfilled when they walk into work from all dimensions of life. And the workplace and driving economic value for the company. I think that's sort of the win-win situation that will hopefully lead humanity into this era of prosperity, right? Because we still haven't cracked the code on everyone being, tapped into.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I mean, it's a wonderful premise. It's a fabulous premise. That's why I wanted to have you on this show, because I think it's such a brilliant concept. When you think of the capital and the human capital that's going to waste, just because we don't know how to use it, that's a big, big, big waste of money and time and resources. So 4 years in, what are some of the discoveries that you've made, or what are some of the things that you know now in terms of finding good matches for work or employment for these people that you're working with?
Totally. I think so. It is a two-sided marketplace, and actually it's three-sided, but for now, when we focus on the job seeker and the employer, for the job seeker, we're seeing, finding work. There's all the, applying to different job applications, figuring out, filling in the same answers over and over, or different, data points you have to share with different employers, writing individualized cover letters. I think all of that we're seeing, is a lot of the manual, mundane things, especially with the introduction of AI. Like we can, automate a lot of that. And that's exactly what we're doing is, building a centralized application process. So they're searching for a job, figuring out what am I really best suited for, applying to the jobs, interviewing, which, especially neurodivergents who might behave differently or might experience anxiety or challenges when, presenting oneself in a professional way and knowing that you are being judged the whole time. That might not, work for someone who requires additional support needs or might have a, unique style of communicating, or for example, might be, deaf or blind and, have, require additional technologies that, might seem quote unquote inconvenient to a recruiter, why aren't they giving me eye contact, and then disqualify the candidate entirely for that. So the interview process is a huge barrier. And then actually getting the job, is another one that you get into the workforce. How do you interact with your team? How do you share your divergence with everyone? How do you bring your authentic self to work? How do you cultivate trust with your manager and create that psychologically safe workspace? There's so much that, prevents someone from having that long-term, job fulfillment and retention. So we're trying to solve, the pain points at every step of the way. So it's sort of like this direct, path towards your dream job rather than this maze.
That's so cool. So what are some of the placements then, or what are the types of jobs that people such as myself, just ignorant people, don't know or might not expect? Where have you placed somebody that turned out it was a perfect or dream job for them that may not have been so obvious at first glance?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, so a lot of the companies we work with are large enterprises, Fortune 500 organizations. And that, first, I'm just going to give one example of a job seeker we placed. They were actually homeless. They lived out of their car for some time. They, were, found an apartment. Finally, were able to, worked as a barista for a while, and then got actually upskilled in a boot camp. So during the pandemic, how can I upskill myself, and sought out a coding boot camp. And it wasn't until, they sort of went through the process with Mentra, shared their neurodivergence, uncovered 70% of the data that we look at is not, collected on platforms like the LinkedIn's and Indeed's. So we're looking at a lot of unique data about this population, and then actually got placed in the job with a Fortune 500 financial organization. And so that was actually Fortune 100. And so that was a huge opportunity for them. They drove across the country. We were on the phone with them. They were like, should I get an apartment? Is it okay if I live out of my car? And we're like, you can afford it now. You can get that, place you want to stay. I mean, and have that shower and have access to those utilities, and, have that employment opportunity. So that was a huge, opportunity for that person to have that outcome in life. I think something that their, family and friends and even themselves could have never thought would have been possible because of all the, barriers, we think, a lot of which are arbitrary, to get a job. So now they're hired there as a software engineer and are happily retained and, excelling and joining the ERGs and really giving back. And it's really awesome to see.
I bet that must make you feel incredible to have done that.
Totally a team effort. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're so glad
you personally by yourself. No, I mean, I mean, just to have contributed to that. How about?
Absolutely, yeah. It's great to think that we can, open up change someone's life to go in a different path than they would have. Beat the often path.
Yes,
that's exactly it.
Because the often path doesn't make room for them. That's part of the premise of the show, and this is why it's so important to me to explore all of the different ways. Some years ago, are you familiar with the musician, a pianist named Derek Paravicini? Have you ever seen that documentary? That was my first awakening. I mean, there have been many shows and documentaries about autism and love on the spectrum and things. It's become more part of our popular culture, I would say, of late. But let's say 15, 10, I don't know, a decade or more ago, I learned about this musician named Derek Paravicini who had severe autism, and to the point where he couldn't tie his shoes, he couldn't eat food without assistance, do any of the day-to-day basic tasks, couldn't get on a train, but he had universal perfect pitch, and he had the gift of any time he heard a song in his entire life, heard it once, he retained it instantly and could play it on the piano instantly forever. So he could play any song, even if it was just somebody driving by in a car for 3 seconds, he would retain that song and be able to play it on the piano later. And they put him to the test in this documentary where you have hundreds of musicians playing a random note. They said, just play a random note. And he has a piano and he's just arpeggiating between all of these, like playing every single note that he hears. And that really clued me into the concept, and I think that's why we use the words neurodivergent, that different is not necessarily worse, it's just different, and that along with perceiving the world in a different way, you can have vastly different strengths and weaknesses. And that guy had talents that nobody else who wasn't neurodivergent could possibly comprehend. So what are some of the talents or those hidden abilities that you've come across that make people who maybe have historically been seen as less than, not only not less than, but better than other people at various different roles or capabilities?
Totally. I love the sound effect there. I instantly got it. Totally.
You should check it out. It's very cool.
I would love to watch that. Yeah.
It's awesome. It'll blow your mind.
Some really cool stories about, I think, it's such a good point that folks who have, different life experiences, different life paths, I think the whole focus on the term, even the term neurodiversity, it's looking at the neurological strengths, and diversity of this population. That diversity can actually be, diversity of thought can be so powerful and helpful, and also can, as you said, come with challenges and, require support needs in order to succeed. And so some of the types of strengths we've seen, especially, first of all, the community is so vast. We have a whole list of have really, really cool strengths that we ask about. So, hyper-focus ability. Some folks have exceptional mathematical skills that you can apply in, IT roles, financial services, even accounting, and even across like the insurance world. We've seen a lot of folks that have exceptional interpersonal ability to be able to really make someone smile, make someone, laugh, and also, communicate effectively in a transaction. So, call centers, for example, are great places. And the beauty of a lot of these roles is that we're moving into an environment now where they are remote. And so folks can work from their homes and have the opportunity to be more flexible. And so those are just, some of the skills, but I want to, there's some really, really unique ones here that I want to share with you.
Exciting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you look at that because it's about processing information at the end of the day, right? And that information could be data. It's about different sensory inputs, perceiving the inputs that come in differently, and that can yield some incredibly different outputs.
Especially for folks who have like extreme, passions, like really diving deep into something, can then tell you absolutely everything about that, topic. So it's really cool that we see that. Okay, I found it.
All right, let's go.
So some cool things, innovation ability, empathy, pattern identification, the ability to memorize things, eidetic memory. My brother actually said he has that. So if he looks at a newspaper for a second and you pull it away and you ask him something very specific about what was said, even if it was upside down, I kid you not, he's able to tell you the answer. Yeah.
See, that's the kind of crazy stuff that you can't believe.
Right. I mean, it's just like the brain is, you think about it, he hasn't spoken a word in his entire life. And so if you think about the other aspects of the brain, the imagery, the visual, the memory retention, like that can be accentuated. Going to like methodical task execution. So many of these, even ability to do something consistently and accurately. Someone can just put their, music on and do a repetitive task and do it to the best of their ability and love doing that every day. So there's so many strengths and then so many different applications across like the blue collar industries to the design and arts and entertainments to the technology, especially with AI emerging and all of these new roles like prompt engineering that don't require as much of a traditional, CS computer science background, that we can now start applying this to, especially for folks and, passion for linguistics, for the English language or just language in general. So we're excited to kind of train this population and make those matches.
I'm living proof that talking a lot and intelligence are not linked. I talk a lot. I'm living proof that you can talk all the time and still be an idiot. As anybody who's listened to the show will testify to. But I think it's such a fabulous idea.
Well, you ask great questions, so...
I ask questions because I don't have any answers. That's the thing. I have to ask. Just don't ask me any questions. I don't have any answers for you. I'm just trying to learn. But... all right, so you were at school. Was it was in Georgia, right?
Yeah, I went to Georgia Tech.
Okay. And you had an influential professor there, and that was sort of what pushed you into this path. So how did you get the seed that maybe this was something that you should make a business around versus study or go to school for or do something else with these concepts? Yeah,
I think the goal, what we were trying to demonstrate was, at the end of the day, we're trying to show that this population can yield like economic value, right? And there's like business value in hiring neurodivergence. And so we wanted to, start a company to show just like, this is not a virtue signaling or a charity. This is like actually going to benefit your bottom line, your retention, your productivity. And so we started this startup with my co-founder in college. I had the really awesome privilege of an opportunity to present a TED Talk, which was where I met my co-founder who was helping organize it.
Wow.
And sort of, came together and did a ton of research. Actually, we just spent almost a year just doing, user research or customer discovery to really understand what are the, especially in the Atlanta area, there's a whole advocacy network we worked with to understand what are the pain points. We saw a lot of, parallels between folks with low support needs and complex support needs that just need a bit of adjustment in the work environment in order to succeed. It's almost like they needed a translation layer, so that a recruiter who had never heard of neurodivergence before could understand them and not have a bias towards them. Or towards us.
Okay, so that segues perfectly into my next question. You mentioned that this is something that you recently discovered about yourself, and get as personal as you feel, or just say skip the question. But how has this impacted you in your own life, and how did you become aware that you yourself were neurodivergent and, as you said, underemployed, or perhaps not making the most of your skills before?
Totally. So in college, I was always in like 5 clubs at the same time. Was also like trying to, do school and then, talking to other entrepreneurs on campus or chatting with research professors, really sharing my mission because I knew that, I knew that my life would be devoted to empowering my brother and empowering individuals who live with disabilities, who oftentimes, were born into circumstances outside of their control, and to try to find equity. So, always had like a, social justice, why do I have these opportunities to go to school, go to college, get a degree, and my brother didn't, and, is still living with my parents. So always kind of questioned that, and was also just constantly exerting myself, with its own challenges of showing up late to things and, not, getting sometimes reprimanded in the class for like drawing on, things and not paying attention. And there were certain subjects I excelled in, certain I didn't. So sort of recognized that, okay, my coworkers and my friends and all were like, hey, ADHD is something that, a lot of folks with ADHD faced similar challenges. And I realized, especially because I was working in corporate America, right after college, I got this awesome opportunity with my co-founder to join a big organization and continue to work on my startup at the same time, and like keep full ownership of the startup. And I was like, perfect. I can learn from, the real world and go into HR systems and understand how it works on the back end and then build something to solve the problem, we saw in the workforce. And sort of got to a point where, there was a lot of just ending the day completely like zapped of energy, crying to myself, wondering like, why am I not like tapping into like why do I feel like I'm so torn? And now I recognize that it was because I was masking, and I was pretending to sort of be on top of everything, to not be struggling on the inside, showed up to work with a straight face, took notes, sat in the background. And there was actually, so especially when you're a social justice advocate and you see things that, you wish you could change or like aren't in alignment with your own values, it's like, okay, it just pulls at your heart so much to the point where it's like, why am I doing these two things? And the brain was just kind of, being a little split in many directions. And so recognize that, that sometimes is a flaw of neurodivergence, and especially folks with ADHD where, you take on too much and then you just can't do well at any of it. So kind of had some great mentors to open my sort of metaphorical eyes to say, hey, why don't you, just zoom in on what you're really, really good at. Focus on your strengths. Don't try to compensate for your weaknesses. And that's when I recognized that neurodivergence could be used as an asset. And so, went into sort of get a formal diagnosis, learned that I'm an #ADHDer, and sort of, a lot of sensory challenges and social challenges and sort of things that come to fit together growing up. But I realize now that I'm still figuring it out. And, especially as someone in the working world is trying to, make your mark and sort of work with large organizations to build that trust. It's sometimes hard to kind of let the mask fully down and like really, share what's going on. But I think I have an incredible team. We're all neurodivergents ourselves. We're a neurodiverse team. And so that allows us to really mold and shape the neuro-inclusive environment we want to build in the world by doing it ourselves and being there for each other and sort of sharing what our needs are and our accommodations are and how we can work most productively, and being empathetic and understanding of that, and actually acting on it, in our day-to-day actions and in our environments. So yeah, it's been a journey for sure. I definitely picked the second option of going deep into it. So thanks for offering me both, though.
Yeah. There you go. You always secretly hope for that. Sometimes people are like, yeah, no. Okay. And they're like, ugh, I'm sweating over here. It's hot enough. California, we got a heat wave going on. I'm sweating through my shirt as it is. No, that's a brilliant answer. And the thing that you said at the beginning, I wish I could highlight something in the show. I wish I could just put a highlighter, put some space around something. What you said at the beginning of that long answer about how you knew you were going to dedicate your life to your brother and to that cause. What a beautiful sentiment that is, and how very rare it is that somebody has such a clear and selfless purpose at such a young age, or ever, if we're being honest, that they have committed themselves to. I think that's just marvelous. I don't have a question. That's awesome. Have you just always been driven by that? Or is that something that got worse? Or was it always gnawing at you like a pebble in your shoe that you needed to be doing more as a quote-unquote social justice warrior?
Totally. I think it was it just felt like a paradox almost, going to school every day, like having friends, having opportunities, and then coming back home and my brother would be, at home all day, going to special ed classes sometimes, not really, oftentimes spending a lot of time absorbing and watching TV and listening to and we try to stimulate his brain now as much as possible, but just thinking about like how important it is to apply that, because, even when I had a little bit of it being utilized in a job, it felt just so, I was like, what is the meaning? What is the purpose here? And I think for folks who are driven by making the world a better place, tapping into that. I think, that quote, like Ikigai, it's like what the world needs, what you're good at. And
I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there is money, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. What drives economic value.
Right.
So it's like, why shouldn't everyone have that, and why is it that only it's sort of where it's not a level playing field, clearly. So I think loving him so deeply has really been like the driving force, and trying to find just a way for, him to, all of us really, to have that peace of mind, knowing that we're contributing to a better world and we can make money on the way and find that fulfillment on the journey. That's the inclusive world I hope that we can all live in one day.
I am right there with you. I hope for the very same thing. It's a beautiful vision of the future. So you were living a dual life, to quote The Matrix. Does anybody even still know that movie? I don't know. It seems you've been living two lives, Jhillika. One of you was working in corporate America. The other one was noticing social justice problems. When you made the switch, how did you make the switch to go all in on what really mattered to you? And how did you notice your own life and brain and your own motivation change when you made that switch fully?
To continue with the metaphor, it was taking the red pill. It was realizing that I needed to step out into the unknown, and there were so many signs from the universe sort of demonstrating there was something was right. Employers were, we were talking with Microsoft and so many other companies, and there was clearly a need. And we had won a grant from the federal government, competing against over 60 companies. We won a grant from Microsoft, over, $500K in sort of funding we had received, and realizing that, okay, it's time to take that step. And so we actually went out to raise capital. And it was a total coincidence that after I quit my job, we bumped into a founder based in Charlotte, where our startup is, who had gone through YC and was connected with Sam Altman, who, ChatGPT, OpenAI, and specifically his fund, Apollo Projects and Hydrazine Capital, now Hydrazine Capital. And so, we had a call with his fund manager, Ryan Cohen, who is awesome. And he sort of saw that, there a lot of times these projects go underfunded, especially with like grants and things from out of college that are sometimes, on the East Coast, and there's a lot of, capital on the West. So really trying to deploy that more equitably around the country. And so we met with Sam for I think it was 15 minutes and he asked a ton of questions. We answered a ton of questions. We asked a ton of questions, and he had conviction. He shares, he's neurodivergent himself. A lot of folks from OpenAI are too. And so really believes in the future of building a neuro-inclusive workplace, which really was what catapulted us into the full-time world. We brought on 5 teammates full-time, and then just in the last 2 months raised our seed round of 3.5 million, and super happy to have oversubscribed with so much interest from the venture world, which, is sometimes when you think about neurodivergence and demonstrating the business value, we're like, we finally got the message through.
Yeah.
Like folks are, there's money being put behind
That's
this. Really
huge
exciting.
validation.
Huge, yeah. And we were able to sort of grow the team and expand to over now 15 teammates. We're serving large, over 15, enterprises and getting neurodivergence placed. We have over 30,000 users on the platform who are job seekers using this tool. It's sort of like, imagine a LinkedIn for the neurodiverse population. It's built to be cognitively accessible for this population. And we're using a lot of the beauty of AI here to make matches that are not just based on keywords or, past experience, but looking a lot more deeper into one's neurotype, understanding one's neuroexceptional strengths, one's environmental support needs and accommodations, and really making a very holistic match with the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow, which will look completely different than the workforce of today. But we're excited to be building for that.
That's just so awesome. Congratulations on the validation. So now that you're, I know the war is not over yet. I know you're still very much in the middle of this. But do you feel that you can now fully be your authentic self on a day-to-day basis? Do you feel that you show up each day as the real you, or do you still sometimes struggle with that?
Such a good question. I think that especially as, a woman, a person of color, neurodivergent, there's just like a lot of, especially when you go into like the fundraising world, but in general, there's a lot of, sometimes bias and stigma placed against you. But I think overall, like I'm every single day working towards like owning more of that and like being more of myself. And I think, when we have like the metrics and like, the actual evidence that this is working, it gives me more, sort of excitement to show that, okay, being my authentic self can reap these results, like, trying to be the living proof that this is possible. So it's a daily work in progress to figure out like what works, for me, for my team. And I think like, especially when it comes to working with other individuals, like trying to be as communicative as possible about how we all feel and what makes us most productive. I think it seems like, okay, it's like, sure, it's helpful to, express yourself. But I think more than that, it's like, well, that makes me like 20 to 30 times more productive. And as a member of this company, like, wouldn't you want that for me? Don't you think we can then move 10 times faster? So it's both like a nice sentiment, but it's just also reaps immense business and reward that is a daily journey for sure.
Yeah. Well, it seems like the world is reflecting back to you that, yes, you are on the right track. If you have any doubts, let me be another voice in your head that says you're definitely on the right track. Keep going. It's a fabulous mission. And I think the fact that so many important people have, taken note of it should be a clear indicator that you really tapped into something here.
Yeah. Actually, I just got back last night from this huge conference called Disability In. And it was so exciting that neurodiversity was one of the, the key topics of the entire event. And Jenny Leigh Fleury, who's the Chief Accessibility Officer at Microsoft, was so incredibly awesome to have us come up on stage during the keynote. And it was, it's perfect timing too, because all of the companies there were like asking the question of how can we be neuro-inclusive? Like, how can we build a workforce that's inclusive of this population? And we talked about AI. Yeah, I was like,
that is
Yeah, it was so cool because we got to also talk about that in the context of AI and the context of all these changes happening and like with all of this technology that we can now use because it's not a binary match anymore. It's like we can go so much deeper to understand the human being, what their learning style is, what their aptitude looks like, and how they perform, and like really optimize for a match that really harnesses and taps into all of those. So that's one of the most exciting parts of all of this is sort of the AI revolution and the inclusion revolution both happening at the same time.
And one of the most interesting things, because obviously ChatGPT is the topic du jour right now. It's the most important thing everybody's chatting about. But of course, what we're all thinking collectively as a society is, how is this tool going to change our jobs, our work, how we all make money? What jobs are going to go away? What jobs are going to be created? And it's very clear that our way of interfacing with work is about to change, and that many traditional roles are going to go away. And like you hinted at earlier, generating the right prompts for AI is a skill. Generating the right tasks for AI to do is a new job field that's going to be emerging. So as our way of communicating and getting things done changes with this technology, the types of personalities and traits and ways of thinking about things are also going to change in terms of what's been historically valued and what might be valued 10, 20, 30 years from now in the new economy. So the idea that we're just going to stick to this 1960s paradigm of what kind of person will be the most successful, I think even now we're seeing that that is no longer the case, as different types of people from different types of backgrounds are becoming enormously successful, doing things that didn't even exist 15, 20 years ago in ways that didn't exist 15, 20 years ago. Do you feel that intuitively yourself?
Yeah. I mean, think about it, like some of the world's greatest innovators, Elon Musk, Greta Thunberg, Alan Turing, even like, Bill Gates and so many others who are, and Steve Jobs, I can go on, Albert Einstein, Walt Disney, so many of whom are neurodivergent, are like, have transformed the way humanity is now structured and organized, and like has brought so much value to humanity and society as a whole. So I think when we think about, okay, what's the common thread amongst all of these innovators, and we're like, oh wait, they are, they all do think super differently, like the most divergent thinking in the world. So that's awesome. And when we think about
suddenly the weakness becomes a superpower. Suddenly it's like, dang it, I wish I had that.
Yeah, totally. And when we look at like, how can we build tools, like it's like, okay, is AI all going to take over jobs? And like, yes, it is really, really scary. And at the same time, it's going to create this whole new, it's almost like a whole new set of roles that will require, some of which might not even require, education and work experience necessarily. So it's going to provide us with the opportunity to level the playing field in a lot of ways, because everyone now needs to learn these new skills. And if we can reskill an entire population who has been left out, individuals with disabilities, neurodivergents who, are systemically under and unemployed, we can bring that reskilling, then there's like a massive workforce shift where we're like, it's not lopsided anymore. We'll balance it out with everyone. And then you look at like better job fits, and something really, really cool that I have to give a shout out to while I'm here is something awesome we're building. It's actually called Neuro. And Neuro is a virtual job coach, leveraging OpenAI's technology to understand the entire, user data that we're collecting, and then be able to help with writing cover letters, with optimizing resumes for certain jobs, with professional email etiquette. That's a tough one. We've seen folks sometimes struggle with, like, instead of taking days to respond to an employer or recruiter, you can take minutes with them, someone proofreading everything you're writing. So it's just like making folks a lot more efficient and really empowering neurodivergents with that additional support that could be so helpful and can also be applicable in so many different contexts. So a lot of cool things coming out of this.
Definitely. I just want to say that you've been very generous with your time. It's, thank you so much. And I'm glad that you found your path, and I'm glad that you found a way to be enthusiastic and excited about all of this. It's just your enthusiasm is infectious, and I have no doubt that many more people will continue to support you. So I hope you consider yourself to be employed now, not underemployed, but I hope you feel that these days you're just employed.
The cup is overflowing, yes.
Yeah. And may you one day be overemployed as you rise up the ladder. And maybe one day you'll look around and say, I'm not really doing a whole lot for all the tens of millions of dollars that they just dump into my bank account. But I think the world is a better place for you exercising your talent and your vision. And I appreciate you sitting and taking the time to chat with me. I think your brother is also very lucky to have you in his life. And I'm sure he feels that way as well. So as a parting word, if you'd like to close us down, any words of wisdom that you'd like to offer or a general something worth sharing, now's the
Totally.
chance.
Yeah. And I am lucky to have him as a brother too. And thank you for sharing that. In terms of one thing I wanted to share is it's so interesting because even for companies or employees that aren't thinking about this population, if you think about it, there's this $1 trillion turnover problem every year companies face. There's, folks that are entire generation of folks that are silent quitting, mental health challenges in the workplace. And then there's this population that's overlooked. And so if we think about there's something that's not working with the way today's workforces are built. And if we are able to, using universal design, solve for the most complex user, exactly, it can really apply to neurodivergence and the neurodiverse, it can apply to the entire human population. And we can benefit everyone with a more, empathetic, humane workforce. And you do spend 70 to 80% of your life in a job. So how can you make that a really enjoyable experience, and contribute to something greater than yourself? So just wanted to share that for a lot of the companies that are like, okay, well, how is this relevant? Or maybe I could hire, one or two folks. It's like, no, this is an entire cultural shift. It's changing the way you currently operate. There's so many folks in your organization today that are, if it's 1 in every 7 worldwide, then there's probably 1 in every 7 in your company. So let's think about, really empowering them and then opening that up to the broader community of talent.
Awesome. What a great way to wrap it up. The website is Mentra, MENTRA.me.
.com. It's actually .com now. We just got the domain
.com.
name.
Hey, all right. Moving up.
Yeah.
Mentra.com, MENTRA.com. Anywhere else they can find you and support you?
Yeah, reach out on LinkedIn. Jhillika Kumar. We have our bopping and popping on LinkedIn as well with our Mentra page. So do connect with us to check out all the cool work we're doing across the states and hopefully across the world one day.
Well, that's a great way to wrap it up. Thanks, Jhillika. It's been an absolute pleasure. And with that, the official podcast is over.